All right, we do have a live look there at Trump's home. I was figuring, maybe jet skis, a few kayaks, someone in the water. That, of course, is Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach. No, you can't see any FBI agents there quite yet. So if Florida Republican Governor Ron DeSantis does not assist in that extradition request, given the questionable circumstances, what does that mean for the case? Joining me now to discuss, former Assistant U.S. Attorney Kevin O'Brien. So, Kevin, this is a very interesting tightrope that the governor of Florida must walk, because he has to appeal to the law. He has to appeal to justice. At the same time, he has to somehow take down what could be a very formidable political foe. How will this work?
Well, a number of things could happen, even without extradition. First, there have been discussions of former President Trump surrendering, and that way he gets to control the process a little more. That was discussed last week. I assume that might be still on the table. And if worse comes to worse, he can be seized. The state of New York can apprehend him. I don't think that would be a pretty picture, and not really one befitting a former president. So we'll have to see how this plays out. But somehow, I don't think Governor DeSantis's vow is going to play much of a role in this process.
And he probably knows that. But also, if he came out swinging against the former president and said, look at his character, he is impeachable at every level, that might turn off a lot of potential voters. But by saying this process seems to be unfair and politically motivated, he seems to be doing himself two favors here and is taking an interesting tack. The former president has said that he wants to appear in handcuffs. Adam Schiff seems to be just foaming at the mouth for the same thing. What is the probability of that?
I guess he could arrange that. But the cat is sort of out of the bag. There have been discussions that have been publicized between Trump's lawyers and the DA's office. So any way it works out, there's going to be an element of pre-planning and premeditation to it. I'm not sure that the drama that Mr. Trump might hope is actually going to play out that way.
So, but this is a very dramatic turn of events here. Does it have an impact on some of the other investigations and potential cases?
Well, it's sort of a psychological point, but in a way, this sort of breaks the spell that Trump was somehow invulnerable to all these investigations. There are a number of them, as you've pointed out. But this is the first one where action's actually been taken. And who knows, it may lead to other actions by other jurisdictions in the short term. We'll have to see.
There is much that remains to be seen here. What will the political fallout be for the president? Because you have two very clear tracks. You have the justice system here in the United States, which is now very much under a microscope. And you also have the political track. But it's interesting because Adam Schiff sort of married the two when he said that, leaders shouldn't be above the law. And I think there are a lot of people who agree with him. And if someone has done something wrong, they should be held to account. But the way Adam Schiff inartfully phrased it, he was saying that the threshold for public officials should actually be lower than the average person. So that means that, by his logic, there could be many more indictments of current and former presidents in the future.
Well, Kennedy, it's true. No person is above the law. That's a maxim of our system. But by the same token, the process has to be fair, and it has to be perceived as fair, which is the test that Mr. Bragg must now undergo with respect to this case. He's going to have Mr. Trump in court, being arraigned. Bail will be set. Scheduling will happen. There will be a trial date, if not sooner than later. But the entire process has to be perceived as fair in order for the full effects of our system of justice to be realized and the legitimacy of that process fully realized.
Yes. What are the chances that the former president uses Elian Gonzalez raft and tries to get to Cuba?
Well, he's going to make every effort to paint it as unfair, I think.
That's absolutely right.
And, that's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, it certainly will. This whole thing, the world is upside down. So someone is shaking the snow globe. Thank you, Matrix. Kevin, thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it.